Well, grab your seats. It is my pleasure today to introduce, and I was talking to Simon before and he said, just remember, I go after you. I hadn't really thought about that. For those who have not met Simon Warwick yet, we first met Simon around Impart when you was at the Australian EO and helped us just to really lean into and get involved in Impart. He took me to India. It's his fault. Oh my goodness. But since then, he's moved on to not moved on as in like chucked out the other and gone to something new, but just in God has moved on to Kids Hope, which is another wonderful Christian organisation in Australia. So he's going to talk about that. But can we just welcome Simon, because he is an amazing guy and we do love him much.
Thanks, mate. So good to be with you again. It's been a few years, hasn't it, Mark? I think about 2018 was the first time I wandered through the doors of this church and said, hi, I'm Simon, let's be friends. And it's been great, kind of cheering you on from a distance. Yes, as Mark said, I was with Empire for just under 5 years and had a sense that my season there had come to an end. I felt like, I won't bore you with the full details because I haven't got hours, but really felt like a season had come to an end. Stepped out of that role with nothing to go to because it was a faith step, because I felt like that's what God was saying. Ended up helping a church transition from one where they would have described themselves as a church that was dying. And by the end of 12 months of walking with them, they'd made some wonderful decisions, and they've now been adopted by another church. They're in a really healthy space. From what I heard recently, they've got far more new people than what they've got the OGs, and that's in like, I don't know, whatever it is, 12 months or something like that. So God's really moving, and quite amazingly, and toward the end of my season with that church, I'm like, God, what is the assignment that you want me to do next? And this Kids Hope thing came up. And it's interesting, and I'll explain why a bit later, but when I was telling my mum about this, she goes, gee, I wish there was Kids Hope around when you were a kid. Yeah, you can laugh, but there's valid reason for it, because I had some challenges as a kid. For those of you who haven't met me yet, and some of you may or may not know, let me show you my family real quick, because this is those that keep me grounded. Jill on the bottom, that way. Your left. I'm doing everything in reverse. Jill's been stuck with me for about 30 years now, very happily married, and she's the one who kind of keeps me grounded. We've got Bailey up next to me in the blue jacket. He's now an electrician, 26 years old, engaged. Isabel down the front is 24. She's just within minutes about to graduate as a chiropractor. And she's really doing well with life. Geordie on the other side is Mr. Entrepreneur. He's 21, 22, recently got engaged to Shay. His most recent business venture was importing an inflatable nightclub from China and then renting it out like you would a jumping castle. And he did well with that, got bored, and then moved on. So what I show all of that just to say there's my retirement plan. Electrician, chiropractor, entrepreneur, one of the three at least. Hopefully a couple can do really well in life and take care of mum and dad, because I've been in ministry for a long time and let's just say it doesn't pay the same as a chiropractor. Let's be honest, and that's okay. So Kids Hope, I'd just love to share a brief video from Tim Costello. Tim was working with World Vision when they brought Kids Hope to Australia, and he'll give you a quick snapshot of what we get to do.
Anyone working with children knows the challenges they face these days. Many children, over 1 million Australian children, live in disadvantaged homes. We've seen children who show behavioural and emotional issues, who experience disadvantage, hardship or conflict in their homes. And on top of this, children have to manage peer pressures, often hidden from sight through technology. How can we equip and prepare our children to thrive socially, emotionally and academically? How can you bring hope to the next generation? Well, there is good news. Since 2004, Kids Hope mentors have worked with thousands of Australian primary school children. They have done one-to-one mentorship, and because of that mentorship, they literally have seen kids' lives transformed into resilience, hope and confidence. Kids Hope is Australia's largest early intervention school-based mentoring program. It's no surprise that teachers around the country have told us how one mentor working with one child for 1 hour a week has such a significant and positive impact on children. They have seen children's emotional needs met and their learning capacity enhanced. Independent research from Griffith and Monash universities confirmed that Kids Hope brings hope, confidence, resilience and security. Principals in tears have told me how it has made such a difference. This program works. I've often described Kids Hope as a gift to our schools, and that is why I am inviting you today to partner with Kids Hope and bring hope to every child. The investment is small, the impact immeasurable.
So we connect churches to local government primary schools. The churches provide mentors for kids facing vulnerability who go into the school during school hours, during class time. They spend an hour a week with these kids just hanging out. I started mentoring my own kid 2 weeks ago. First week we played basketball for an hour. I got very sore, and for about 2 days I was in pain. So the week after we did some cooking. Next week we might build a model or something like that. It's just fun to hang out with a kid in grade 6. Right now we've got around 190 programs across the country serving alongside 200 churches. Just around 1,000 kids are being mentored through our program right now. And we're currently sitting at around 30,000 mentoring relationships after the last 21 years. Now, a mentoring relationship is one mentor, one child for a year. So about 30,000 of those have happened in the last 21 years. The crazy thing is the need is far outweighing our capacity to serve. And our desire is to see Kids Hope mentoring available to every Aussie child that needs it. Today we're going to spend a bit of time in the Word, which is a good thing to do on Sundays when you come to church and read something of the text that has been given to us through generations and generations that may hopefully inspire us in our day-to-day life. And we're going to read a passage or look at a passage from James's letter to the church. Now James, the general consensus is that this is Jesus' brother. He got to hang out, he got to spend time with Jesus, and in later years, he was actually one of the leaders or the leader of the Jewish Christian church. He's writing to the Jewish Christians across the known world, and we know that because it says in the very start, chapter 1, verse 1, to the 12 tribes scattered amongst the nations. One writer describes James as this: as a leader of the Jerusalem church, James wrote as a pastor to instruct and encourage his dispersed people in the face of their difficulties. Now, here's a group of people who are just kind of doing life in their own community. They had the rituals and the plans and the things that all their neighbours were doing. You know, there'd be certain sacrifices that they would do, there'd be certain celebrations that they would do, they would recognise certain days of the week that were important, different things in the flow through the calendar. Everyone, all of your community kind of did the same thing. And then this guy, Jesus, rocks up. And he was kind of one of you, but he takes the things that you know and redirects it to something different. You know, says, well, you know, that's what we've grown up knowing, but this is really what you need to be doing. And then that same Jesus died. And that same Jesus rose again. And that same Jesus redirected everything. And here you are, realising that life has been transformed. All of a sudden, you're now this follower of Jesus. They called it in that time the way. And these people all of a sudden found themselves feeling different to the community that they were in. Could you imagine? Like you're used to going to synagogue with old mate next door, and all of a sudden, you know, and he was going down to do the sacrifice that you were used to doing growing up, and all of a sudden you go, hang on, I don't need to do that anymore. Something's changed. I don't need to do that because Jesus came and he died and he was a perfect sacrifice for me. And now my life, although I'm in the same community that I was in before, I'm kind of living a different culture to the culture around me. And then this horrible thing happens. One of your leaders, standing up for exactly what you believe, Stephen's his name, was stoned to death for living a life and claiming the things that you personally believe. We can read about that in Acts 6, verse 7. When your leader gets killed for believing what you believe, it's not unlikely that you might run away. And that's what the Christians in that time did. They bolted. They went to all of these different places in the known world. They were scattered through the nations, as it was described. And all of a sudden, they're gone from being used to living in a culture to living in your own culture, but it's now different, to living in very different cultures. You know, these people had very different ideas about sacrifice. The idea of sacrificing your child wasn't a big deal to appease your God. The idea of all sorts of rituals that were far different to what you've grown up with was now the norm. And these people were totally engaged and immersed in that culture. And James is writing to them because he's saying, remember who you are. Remember whose you are. It's so easy to get caught up in the culture that you're living in. Remember who you are. You know, we can read that about the Bible, but then you've experienced it. Have you ever gone to started a new job and you rock up and they're all a bit different? Like not bad different, but just different. You know, they get up at a certain time and go and get coffee and you're sitting there, aren't we supposed to work? Oh, this is the time we get up and go get coffee. And then lunch happens at 12:30, but it used to happen at 12 o'clock at the other place, but that's the culture of this new community. Have you ever rocked up to a new church? Of course you are, because you're all here. Many people here would not have been born in this community. You've come from a different community. And then this community was, you know, you've got Pastor Mark and he's a bit weird. Yeah, see, you laugh because it's true. Well, you know, I'm being polite. But the culture here is a little bit different. We've been to places, we've started new jobs, we've been to new schools, whatever it might be, where the culture is different to what we're used to. And then after a little while, you start becoming like the culture that you're in. You know, Mark mentioned before, I spent a lot of time going to India. I love India. I love the people. I love the food. I love the place. I love the smells. I love India. It's so much fun. But because I've been there so much, I can sometimes be a little bit Indian. So like we go to an Indian restaurant and my kids just look at me and wait for me to start doing this. I get the head wobble happening. And it's not being derogatory. It's just because I'm so used to engaging in that culture. And when I'm in that community, I become like the community that I'm around. And my kids are like, Dad, stop it. Stop it. One of our staff members at Kids Hope, she's from India. She's awesome. And the very first day I met her, hi, I'm Rita, how are you? And she's gone, hi, Simon, how are you? And I'm like, I'm good. And I'm like, oh, my head did it again. I don't know whether you get one of those neck braces to stop your head moving. I felt like I might have needed that. And I had to say to her, Amrita, I have to be up front. I've spent so much time in your culture. When I'm around people who are Indian, I just start acting like the culture that I was in without knowing it. And she's very gracious and lets me get away with it a little bit. We become who we hang out with. And without knowing it or making a conscious decision, we can very easily become like the culture that we're immersed in. And James's language, he describes it as being polluted by the world. What he actually means is that anything in conflict with the ways of Jesus is being polluted by the world. You're becoming like the culture that you're in. That's the context to the letter that James is writing to the believers. I think it's helpful for me personally to understand that context because it gives us a bit more insight on how we can apply it to our life today. So then we get to James 1, 26 and 27. It says this: For those who consider themselves righteous and do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after the orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Now this verse actually sets up the rest of his letter. If you just look through your study Bible and you see even just the headings going through that, you see things like favoritism forbidden, faith and deeds, taming the tongue, 2 kinds of wisdom, submit yourselves to God, and so on. This particular verse sets up the rest of the letter. So let's spend a little bit of time looking at these 2 verses. It starts with this, verse 26. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Now, religion here isn't talking about the title. You know, in our context today, we might hear the things like, what religion are you? You know, in the Christian faith, you might look at different denominations or there's different religions from different cultures. That's not the word the intent of the word that's been translated here. In fact, in this verse, these couple of verses, the word religion is translated from two different words, believe it or not. The first one is an adjective describing the activity of religion. You know, the idea of fearing God, like responding to this amazing creator God, this overwhelming God who created everything. You know, the one who thought about life and it happened. He spoke the word and it came to be. The one who created the trees and the skies and the birds and ultimately people. The one who for generation after generation after generation creates more people, you and I, for the purpose of relationship with him. This idea about the bigness and the amazing size and scope of God. You know, we sometimes hear that described as the fear of God, the idea that he is so big and so amazing. He could wipe us off with a flick of a finger if he wanted to, yet he loves us and calls us into relationship with him. That's that activity of religion. And the second one is, the second word religion is actually often translated into the word worship, how we respond to who he is. Now, we sung some songs together. We engaged in one form of worship, but worship is far more than just singing. It's how we live our lives, how we engage people around us. So this idea of this big, amazing God, the fear and overwhelming nature of who God is and how big he is, and then how we choose to respond, that's what he's looking at when he's using the word worship. James is referring to a heart posture of what has changed in the inside and then an outworking of that. One writer describes it as this: religion is the external manifestation of spirituality, a relationship to God rooted in the heart and shaping of one's life. God in us, revealed through our actions. He goes on to say, those who consider themselves religious and do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion or worship is worthless. What does this mean? Well, as you continue on, one translation uses the term unbridled. As you continue through the book, he actually expands on this point and talks about the tongue being like the bit in a horse's mouth, this small thing having the power to turn the whole beast, or the rudder on a ship. You know, this small little bit on a ship can actually turn the whole thing. The power of our tongue, the power of our words. Keep a tight rein on your tongue, he's saying. Why? Because it reveals what's inside us. If we're saying all sorts of things that are inconsistent with who Jesus is and the ways of Jesus, well, then that's what's coming from inside is what's being presented outside. Christ in us, through us. If we can't keep a tight rein on our tongues, we're deceiving ourselves. What's actually going on inside us? If we truly respond out of worship and reverence to him, our actions being the response to that, what we say reveals that reality. He goes on. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after the widows and the orphans in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Now, in the ancient Near East, the people that he was writing to be a widow and orphan was not a good thing. It's not a good thing today, but they didn't have Centrelink. They didn't have places like Kingborough Family Church who can have a food service opportunity through the weeks. They didn't have places like that. In fact, if you were a widow or an orphan in that time, you were probably considered to be cursed. It was probably your own fault that you're in this space. So why would people want to help you? That was the world that these Christians were going to. And James is saying here, hang on, take care of these people. That's what God wants. That's what he counts as valuable, to take care of the widows and orphans. And that's what the Christians did. They got alongside these people. They found them up the street. They went into their worlds and they said, hey, who's in your world? Come into my family. Be part of our community. And not just because we're having pity on you, but because you're valuable, because you're inherently valuable in the eyes of God, and thus you're inherently valuable in my eyes too. Come into our world, be part of our community, be known as one of us. That's exactly what they did. You know, when I look at the idea of an orphan, it comes from the root word to be alone or bereaved, or often rendered fatherless. And these people can give nothing in return. You'll note that James said, in their distress, not if they're distressed. This is the life that these people are living in. James is saying, people who follow Jesus, take care of them. That's what God finds important. James is saying, how do you know if God's at work in you? Well, you see it by the way he works through you. The more Jesus in, the more Jesus out. The more we become like Jesus, the more we're going to just naturally act like him. You know, in my context, and I look at Kids Hope, that's what we get to do all the time. These kids may not be actual orphans, but they deal with challenges all the time. You know, the idea of being alone, bereaved, fatherless, unprotected. We see these attributes all around us. We've got parents who are addicted to these things, and they'll be sitting with their kid, flicking. My kids taught me a new term, death scrolling. Is that right? Doom scrolling. Like seriously? That's a term. And these kids are just stuck on the peripheral while mum or dad are doing that. We've got a society where many parents haven't taught to be parents. We've got kids being stuck in front of screens. Did you know that there's actually some studies that are finding that little kids with screens all the time are actually losing their capacity to engage with peripheral vision? Because they're so used to doing this, they just don't have the capacity. Children don't know how to have conversations with adults anymore because they don't have adults having conversations with them. There's a significant increase in school avoidance. There's an overwhelming risk of rise in kids experiencing mental health issues at a younger age, it seems. The kids, what they're going through today is far more complex than what I ever had to go through. Widows and orphans, literally or figuratively, are all around us. You know, according to the ABS National Study of Mental Health and Wellbeing released in 2022, more than 2 in 5 Australians will experience mental health issues at some point in their lifetime. And in the 2021, more than 3.4 million Australians sought help from mental health professionals. The extent of mental ill health among Australian youth particularly is concerning. Well, with almost 40% of young people aged 16 to 24 years old being found to have experienced a mental disorder in their previous 12 months alone. That is the world that we find ourselves in. And I can't help but read this letter from James. And if James was in the church today, if he was our pastor sending us an email today, or probably like a video message or whatever it might be, he'd be saying exactly the same thing. Remember, followers of Jesus, religion our God, our Father accepts as pure and faultless as this, to look after the orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. You know, why is it important to me? Well, here's a photo of me when I was in grade 2. That's where you go, oh, thank you. Yes. Yes, I was cute. Life happened. We'll move on. Grade 2, we just had to move house. My dad had left our family. He decided that he'd prefer to be with another woman, and mum couldn't afford to live where we were, so we had to move house. Moving house meant moving schools. And they decided the wise thing to do would be move me in the end of grade 1 for a couple of weeks with the new kids to get used to them before Christmas holidays, and then starting grade 2. In those 2 weeks, I got bullied by this girl who happened to be one of the teacher's kids. So it's pretty hard to fight back when the teacher's kid is the one bullying you. I was promised she was not going to be in my class the next year. Grade 2, first day of grade 2 comes around. We're all lining out in front of our classroom. Guess who's in the line? I started bawling. The loss of my dad, not understanding what was going on, having to move house, and now this, a bully. This kid rocks up. You all right? He just started at school too. His name's Lael. And I'm like, yes. Their family just moved to the area. They'd moved to the area because mum and dad were doing Bible college at a local Bible college. And Lael and I became mates. That day I went back to their house and we hung out. And their family kind of took me into their community, into their family. My ridiculous sense of humour, I now blame on them. There's the issues. You know, I remember their dad just getting alongside me, Rodney, just kicking me up the backside if I needed it, treating me like one of the kids. I remember we did like the Good Samaritan play at a church that they were going to, and I was the one who got beaten up, and Rodney was the Good Samaritan, and he was also the donkey. And so, like, I don't know how that works, but either way, he picked me up after being beaten up by his children, nonetheless, threw me over his shoulder and galloped me around the whole church. And I remember every time we went up and down, I got winded from his shoulder. It was the best moment of my life. He paused and he cared. Why? I guess I was kind of an orphan. You know, I had mum, wonderful, amazing, godly woman who prayed and kept me in community like this. But I didn't have a male role model. And Rodney didn't intentionally go, oh, this is a problem, I'm going to help fix it. He's just present because he's a follower of Jesus. He operated with who he is on the inside, and that came out in just how he lived his life, in his words and his deeds and his imperfection and his ridiculous sense of humour. This is a photo of the Zish family. In January last year, I'm still part of their family. They treat me as a family member. In fact, a couple of them came over from overseas. That's Lael at the back and Gillian down the front. Lael from America, Gillian from the UK. And of course, they invited me to go and spend time with the family. My kids call him Papa Rodney. That's what being a follower of Jesus is all about, taking care of the widows and the orphans. You know, I showed a picture of my family before, but let me show them once again. Because I have every right in the world as we know it to be a drug addict under a bridge. Yes, I've told you a snippet of my history. Father left. Then he died when I was 10. Then his wife was tragically murdered 6 months later, my stepmother. My stepfather through my teenage years was really problematic. I've got every excuse, but because God's people chose to be in my world, because they showed me love and affection and time and just all the stuff with being part of a broader Christian family, I can stand here today married for just over 30 years, 3 adult children who are all doing well in life, who all are great mates with each other. And Jill and I are thankful they like hanging out with us too. I became like those I hung out with. James 1, 26 and 27. Those who consider themselves religious and do not keep a tight rein on their tongue deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after the orphans and the widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. You know, right now with Kids Hope, we've got 75 schools on our waiting list. 75 public schools saying, can we please have a church partner with us and provide kids with mentors to spend an hour a week and play basketball if you're fit enough? Or cook? Or make a model? Whatever it is that shows value to that child. 75 schools are waiting for churches across our country right now. I'm excited by that. That's my context, but what's yours? Who's in your world right now that wouldn't necessarily come and approach you because they don't know that they can? They may not walk through the door of this church because they don't know that it's relevant for them, but you're in their world. You. Each one of you have people in your world that would be described as a widow or an orphan, whether it's actual or whether it's spiritual or whether it's emotional. Who in your world just needs you to come alongside them, put your arm around them and be their friend? Just be present with them and for them. I don't know them, but you do. And the difference that you can make is so very, very significant. When I was sitting in the back of church, you never would have picked me as a kid who was in need. But clearly I was, and praise God for Rodney and the Zish family. Who is that for you? Can I pray for you? Lord Jesus, I thank you for my friends at this amazing church. I thank you that they're already on the front foot with serving the community, with engaging those that don't know you. Lord, I love that they do that corporately. Right now, I ask that you challenge them to do it individually, themselves, personally, as their own family. Who is in their world? That they just need to get alongside, show love to, spend time with, engage with. Reveal to them what true religion is, worshipping and loving you and responding because of how good you are. For no other reason than because they're worthwhile, because you love them. And Father, I pray for each of those people that they engage with, the ones that even you've got on their mind right now, may they respond firstly to them and then through them to you. Lord, I pray you bless my brothers and sisters in your wonderful name. Amen.
It's fantastic. Feel challenged? It's good. I'm glad you changed that message. That was much better, that one. That's good. It is amazing how much we can change a person's life just by being present. Like so much. I'm going to ask Simon to hang around and he can pray for people if anyone wants prayer. If you feel challenged by that message, do something about it. You know what I mean? Don't just go, oh yeah, that was great. Come back next week and see what happens. You know, actually do something about that.